Why narcissists use people. Let's just say it like it is. Narcissists are users. They use people. And there is no such thing as a relationship with a narcissist. It will only ever be a transaction. And that transaction will be one-sided. Of course, if you're still in the love bombing phase, if you're at the beginning of the relationship, you may assume that maybe you're not dealing with a narcissist after all because it doesn't seem one-sided. They're giving you the lies, the future faking, they're promising you this happy future together, going on trips, vacations, getting married, having a family. But that's just what future faking is. They promise you that in the moment, and time goes by and you never actually get that. You never get what they first sold to you initially. So although it may not seem like it in the beginning, it is still just a one-sided transaction where you're giving everything to them, all of your time, energy, money, and resources. And although they're breadcrumbing you, they're feeding you these lies, they're selling you a dream, you will soon discover that there's nothing in it for you. There's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Initially, in the love bombing phase, it may seem like something could come into fruition at some point in the future. But these are just lies that they're feeding you in order to get you to do what they want, to give them what they want in the present. Because narcissists are users, and they are users because they are self-absorbed and they lack empathy. It's all about themselves. Now, why do they use people? What is the purpose behind that? They're using you to extract value from you. Now, why would someone need to extract value from you? And why would they do that and not reciprocate anything back to you? It's because they know they understand that they have less value than you. And not only that, but in fact, they are valueless. They have no value. They have no self-worth. So they've got to get their self-worth from external things. They've got to get their self-worth from you. They recognize you as being more valuable than they are. But of course, let's not forget that in some situations, their victims, their targets, may have low self-worth themselves. And then that's how they become like these codependents, these people pleasers. But they're doing anything they can to try and please this person and to overcompensate, overextend themselves to make up for their own sense of low self-worth. But even if you're someone with high self-worth, as I believed myself to be in past narcissistic relationships, then they'll just work overtime in a devaluation. They will target your self-esteem. They will target your self-worth. And you may be doing and giving for them, maybe because you recognize that you are very valuable. You recognize that you have a lot of value, and maybe you just feel bad for them. As I did in many situations before. I recognized my value. I just felt sorry for them. And I considered myself to be a nice person who wanted to do good for others, who wanted to make things better for them. So it's not always about having low self-worth. Although, if you have dealt with a narcissist and you've been through the devaluation phase, then it is important to be practicing self-love, using positive affirmations, journaling, practicing self-care. It's important to be doing all of these things taking care of yourself, because these are the effects that their devaluation can have on you. Even if before dealing with them you did have high self-worth, they will bring that down because they have to in order to control you. They have to make you think that you're so much less than who you actually are. But the reality is that they're the ones who need you, you do not need them. And that's why they're the ones who are using you. If you want to know your worth, if you want to know your value, if you want to know how great of a person you actually are, whether or not they're telling you, and in most situations they likely won't reveal that to you, but here is how you know, here is how you recognize just how valuable you are, just how much worth you have to them. All you have to do is recognize what you're giving, what you're putting out, and it doesn't always have to be your money or resources. Narcissists need attention, validation. They need your time, your effort, your energy. So recognize what you're giving, what you're putting out to them, and then recognize what you're getting back, or should I say what you're not getting back. Because typically you won't get anything back from them, or they'll just give you the bare minimum. And that's because of their low self-worth. I mean, just think about it. If someone has an abundance of self-worth, an abundance of value, they're just going to be giving it out, handing it out. They're not going to care. It's because their value is so low. Their value is very low, and they know it. And that's why they're hoarding whatever breadcrumbs they have, while they're taking and using you for that reason. And many of them are using you while still having these plans with you in the future, because they assume that at some point you could just bounce back from that. They recognize your value, they recognize your worth. That's why they're around you, that's why they targeted you in the first place. But there is no future with someone like that. They are users, they are manipulators, and anything you have with them, it's always going to be fake. When something is transactional, that's not a relationship. It's a transaction. It's just an exchange of goods or services. There's no real meaning or purpose behind it. There's no emotional connection, because that comes from validation. And yeah, of course, they want your validation. And they're also getting validation from so many other sources of supply as well. But what about validating you? No, they can't do that. Because by validating you, it instantly makes you realize your worth and how they're not deserving of what you're doing for them. Of course they're not deserving of what you're doing for them. It's pretty much like someone just plonked a brand new Ferrari in front of them. Just imagine this hypothetical situation with a narcissist, and a narcissist could be likened to an emotional toddler. So just imagine there's like this, just a toddler standing on the street, and then with a crane, someone just dumps a brand new Ferrari in front of them. They're just going to be looking at it like in awe. They're going to be admiring it. They're going to think it's something great. They might recognize that it's valuable, but they're not going to know what to do with it. They're not going to know how to take care of it, because they haven't got any experience with that, with high value things. They haven't got anything of value themselves. But if you've had experience with these types of things, if you know anything about luxury cars, supercars, then you understand. Then even though that Ferrari may be right in front of you, just because it's there, just because it's in your presence, and just because it could be yours, it doesn't mean that you have the means, it doesn't mean that you have the capabilities, the qualities to be able to take care of that. Because a car like that, it requires a lot of maintenance. And sometimes, in some situations, some things can cost more to maintain over a certain amount of time, especially over several years. It can cost more to maintain than it costs to purchase them. And of course, I'm not just talking about money. I'm not saying that one person just has to financially take care of the other. I mean, that's just going back to a transactional relationship, and that's usually what narcissists are like. But then also saying that I'm not against traditional relationships where maybe the man does the work and provides for the family, and the woman stays at home, takes care of the children, cleans the house, does the cooking. I'm not against that at all. I'm all for traditional relationships, but I think it does need to be based more on validation rather than it being a transaction, because that's when it is real. Yes, we can have traditional roles, the validation side of it. That's what really makes a relationship. When it's just all transactional and you're just doing chores, doing things you don't really want to do. It's like you're just doing it so that they do something for you. It gets old, it gets boring. It can be a very miserable experience. Myself, my ideal kind of relationship, I guess, is obviously not with a narcissist, and one where both the man and woman are working. So they both have their own separate lives, their own separate purpose. And it's not a transactional relationship. Because, I mean, that's the thing in these types of relationships. It's like when you need them, when you couldn't live without them, when you couldn't just, whatever they're given to you, you couldn't just create that for yourself. That's when it becomes transactional. And this is why validational relationships, to me, are more real. It's more genuine. And typically they are a lot happier as well. And I do believe that this is why, if we look at a lot of men these days, it's like they get to a certain age and they start being unfaithful to their wives, and then they start looking for a younger partner. Why do they do that? Most likely because they're in a transactional marriage and they're seeking validation. And I'm not just going to poke at men now. I mean, of course, I am a man myself. But it's also a similar thing with women. There's a lot of women these days who they're in a marriage and they have this provider, it's transactional. And then suddenly, it's like they become these cougars and they're looking for a toy boy. And let's not forget 50 Shades of Grey. So it's not just men or it's just women, it's both. And a lot of people, they do enter into these narcissistic relationships. And there's a lot of relationships these days where people are just using each other. It's like, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And you're providing a service to each other, but there's no actual emotional connection. And I think that's what really makes a relationship thrive. That's what really creates a happy relationship. Because that's how it is when you're in these relationships with narcissists, or should I say these transactions. It's like you're doing things for them, and you're getting little or nothing back in return. They're just giving you lies and future faking. And sometimes it even gets to a point where maybe they become desensitized and they just get so bored of even what you're providing to them. And they can see that you're getting something out of it. You're getting a payout by helping them, by making them feel better. So then what they do is they don't even give you the opportunity to do that. It actually gets to that extreme sometimes, where they won't even let you help them anymore, because they can see that although you're getting nothing from them, they're not even grateful, they're not giving you a thank you, they're not appreciating you, they're not giving you anything back in return, but they can see that you're still getting something just by knowing that you're providing a service to them. So then sometimes they won't even give you that, and you might see this as an example in relationships with narcissists, where it's like you may not even really enjoy having sex with them. It may not even be something you like to do, especially after they start abusing you. I mean, it's not exactly enjoyable having sex with your abuser, but you still do it because you know it makes them happy. And as an empath, even a codependent or people pleaser, when you know that you're making someone happy, you're getting a little payout from that. And the narcissist may become aware of that. Yes, it can actually go to this extreme with the selfishness. And then what they will do is they will withhold sex from you, seek out a new source of supply, while they're devaluing you. And then they'll just have sex with them, even though you don't even enjoy doing it with them. It just feels like a chore for you when they're devaluing you. And of course, that just turns you off. You don't feel any attraction towards them anymore after that. But because they can see you getting a payout from it and it's making you happy by knowing that you're pleasing them, then they'll take that away from you as well. And it's not just with sex, it could be with other things as well. The selfishness can be very extreme with narcissists. They're really that self-absorbed where it quite literally is all about them. It's all about them, their interests, their needs. They're not even considering you. They're not considering how you feel. They're not considering what you want. They're not considering what is in your best interest. It's just all about them. It's just all about you're in this relationship with them, and you should see it as a privilege to be around them, even while they're actually not even serving you in any way, and they need you far more than you need them. And if anything, they're actually posing a hindrance in your life, and yet they expect you to see it as a privilege to be around them, and they expect you to serve them. Meanwhile, you're really not getting anything out of it at all. And as I've experienced myself with these narcissists who expect you to see it as a privilege to be around them, while they're doing nothing for you. All you have to do is just kiss their asses goodbye. Just go off on your own, spend some time for yourself. And whatever they're doing for you, you could do a lot more for yourself. And I am living proof of that. And yet they have such arrogance, and they feel like they're entitled to you, and they're entitled to be selfish, to be all about themselves, because they're just this wonderful person. The irony is that you could do far better without them. You really can. Of course, that's why they target your self-esteem. That's why they devalue you, to control you, to stop you from leaving them, to stop you from really realizing that you deserve more. because they want to keep you down, they want to keep you stuck so that they can keep using you. And they use you because they have very low self-worth. So they've got to get their false sense of self-worth externally to regulate their own emotions, because they can't regulate their own emotions from within. So that's just what they have to do. They have to use you. And they may be using you because maybe you have some things to work on yourself. Maybe you have low self-worth. And I don't want to shame anyone who may feel low on themselves. I mean, you may have felt that way before you got involved with the narcissist, maybe in a result of childhood trauma, or it may be because they devalued you for such a long time. I mean, when you're being brainwashed every day, you're being devalued, of course it will affect your sense of self. But then, some of you may have high self-worth, and if you look back, you may see that you just felt pity for them. You felt bad, you wanted to help them. And that's why they probably played the victim around you, because they recognized you've got a lot of value, and you recognized that you had a lot of value and that they didn't, and you saw it as a situation, an opportunity for you to help someone. So that's important to identify as well. Because if it was the case where you had low self-worth before you got involved with them, then you know that you just need to work on your self-worth. And if it was the case where you had very high self-worth and they had low self-worth, they didn't have much value to provide to you, then you just got to recognize that not everyone is deserving of you. Just because you have some value to provide and they want you to provide something to them, it doesn't mean that you should. It doesn't mean that they deserve that from you. You got to look at it like, all right, so I help you, I give this to you. What do I get out of it? What are you going to do for me? And again, it's not always about money or anything like that. I mean, in my opinion, I believe that relationships should be 50-50. But there's all sorts of things that need to go into a relationship. Especially our emotional needs need to be fulfilled. It can't just be something where you're their doormat, you're their emotional punching bag, and yet they don't want to ever listen to you. They don't ever want to help you with anything. And that's what a relationship should be about. They should be there for you, and you should be there for them. It shouldn't be one-sided. But as we know, that's how it often is with a lot of these narcissists, if not all of them. It's like you got to be there for them, you got to be their doormat, their fool, their emotional punching bag. And it's like, what do you get out of it? And even if you are getting something out of it, even if you are getting money, a place to stay, whatever it may be, a marriage, a family, but then you're also being abused, that's still not really a fair deal. Because at the same time you're still being abused, how can you enjoy it? How can you be happy? But even in those situations, I mean, especially when money is involved, if someone's taking care of you, if someone's paying for you, then it's not right to continue in that situation, because then it's like you're just using them financially when really you're not happy with them. You've got to be careful with that, because that's the excuse a lot of narcissists use. They will stay with a person for a certain amount of time, use them for everything they've got, and then at the end of it, they will say that you were the narcissist, you were abusing them, and they weren't happy with anything that you were doing for them because of how you were treating them, and that's why they shouldn't have to reciprocate anything back to you. So we do have to be careful in those types of scenarios as well. But these narcissists, yes, they will use you. They will exploit you. And although they make it seem like they're the best thing since sliced bread, and as though they expect you to see it as a privilege to be around them, it's actually quite the opposite. They have very low self-worth, very insecure. And so they are seeking this self-worth externally from you. Sometimes it may not even seem like they're getting anything out of it in some situations that they may be involved in. But they always are. Even if they're not getting money, even if they're not getting a place to stay, it may just be someone who they can abuse, who they can step on, who they can walk it over. And maybe that's just what they're looking for. So that's what they're getting out of it. They're always getting something. And what we need to do as empaths is that we just need to leave these narcissists behind. Let them find someone who is more like themselves. Let them find someone who is just as fake as them. Because they do not deserve someone real and genuine like you. Someone who actually cared about them. Someone who had their best interest in mind. Someone who wanted to be there for them emotionally. They do not deserve it. They deserve someone who is more like them. Typically, as I've spoken about, as I've mentioned in past live videos, that's typically exactly what will happen. Is that when you leave these arrogant, delusional narcissists behind, they do typically get manipulated and sold a dream by someone more like them, typically a grandiose narcissist. Because they may be complaining about you, saying you don't work hard enough, you don't make enough money, you're not good enough for them, you're not attractive enough. Then that's exactly what they run off and find. While you're trying to be there for them, cater to them, fulfill their emotional needs, then as they go off, they get manipulated by a manipulator, a con artist who sells them a dream. And maybe this other manipulative narcissist, maybe they look good, they dress good, maybe they got tons of money, they got a nice car. And now these two narcissists, they're just using each other. So in that situation, it may not be a one-sided transaction, but either way, it's still a transaction. And actually, what they had with you, that wasn't fully a transaction. Because what you were giving to them, it was real, and you weren't really expecting anything back in return. In some situations. So they had something somewhat real with you. It's just that they can recognize it, they can appreciate it, and then they run off and they actually have something completely fake with someone else. But many narcissists, they do just go off and live in this delusion because they have all of these outside supporters, as I spoke about before, like two grandiose narcissists on social media. They've got all of these fans, all of these followers, and they're just selling this dream to them. They're getting all of these likes, all of these comments, all of this support, and then it makes it feel real to them. It makes them feel like they've actually got something grand, something impressive. But actually, no, it's all fake. But that's all they care about, is the false character, the facade, the illusion. That's what they're looking for, and they get around people, they use them for your time, your energy, your money, resources, so that you can provide things to them to support this illusion. And that's the funny thing about it, because you're the one who is providing to them. You're giving them the money, the tools for them to create and sustain this image. And that image is not even for you. It's not to please you. It's not to make you happy. It's not to make you feel good about yourself. When you're taking care of them, you're giving them a home, They're spending all of this money on their clothes, jewelry, makeup, whatever it is. Maybe you buy them a car. When you're buying them all of these things, when you're taking care of them, that's not so they can sustain themselves to then please you. That's so that they can get validation from other people. And many of you may have seen this, where it's like you were taking care of a narcissist and you bought them clothes, maybe you bought them a car, you took them into your home, and then they target a news source, and then suddenly they're picking up the news source in that car, they're bringing the news source into your home, and sometimes in extreme situations, but many of you may have experienced this, they divorce you, they file for child support, alimony, and then before you know it, and the house that you paid for, now you've got the narcissist in there, and the news source is sitting on your couch watching your TV, driving your car around, and they're spending your money to go on vacations. This is exactly what they're like. They will just use anyone and everyone. And even the news source, in some ways that can be more validational when it's short term. The sources they're not with for that long do tend to be more validational. Not always, but a lot of times that is the case. But then it's temporary. Anything when it's long term, that's transactional with narcissists. And that's how when you see them go off the news source, it often seems so real. Because it's kind of like, as I mentioned earlier, with these men who may have been in long-term relationships, marriages, and then they want to go off and meet someone half their age for validation. And then also some of these women in marriages, they get to a certain age and then they become these cougars, they want these toy boys. They like reading 50 Shades of Grey. It's that same type of thing. And this is what narcissists are like throughout their lives. It really is. But the narcissist is young. Usually then they are looking more for validation as a form of feeding their ego and regulating their self-worth. But then they get to a certain age and then they become more transactional, where they're looking for a provider, they're looking for someone to take care of them. And then they stick with that for a certain amount of time, and then they start to miss that again. Then they want the validation again. And then that's when you may find that they're cheating on you. They got someone else on the side, they got a news source. Because they just tend to switch back and forth. It's like 1 minute they want something transactional, then they want something validational. But either way, I mean, even when it's validational, it's still transactional with a narcissist. It still is. Because it's almost like they expect that from you. They expect you to see it as a privilege to be around them. They expect you to validate them, to compliment them. This false image that they've created. So with narcissists, I mean, it really is just purely transactional. Because how can you really validate something that isn't even real, that doesn't even exist? It's still just a transaction. But I'd like to hear from you. Let me know if you've been used by a narcissist. What happened? What did they use you for? And how did it make you feel? Let me know in the live chat. Let me know if you have any questions as well. I will read them out and respond to them. A lot of people talking about karma here. Miss Katara Love says, please talk about their karma. I've done so many videos on karma already. They do get their karma, whatever way you look at it. Whether you look at it from a spiritual perspective or a psychological one, they do get what they deserve. And what they deserve is not anything good. It does come back to them. There are clinical studies that state that bullies who harm and intimidate are at a 10 to 25 times more risk of developing a psychiatric condition than their own victims, as well as anxiety disorders, depression, relationship issues, problems with their work, substance misuse, and so many other things. And that's just from a psychological perspective, based on clinical studies. So don't worry about that. Whatever they've done to you, whatever they've used you for, they have been getting their karma and they're still getting it now. I mean, just look at them. They're always angry. They're always miserable. They weren't happy with anything you did for them. Do you think they're ever going to be happy in their entire lives if they weren't happy with you? They weren't happy with you self-sacrificing, bending over backwards for them. They weren't happy with that. That wasn't good enough. They still wanted more. They're never going to be happy. If they couldn't be happy with all of the effort you put in, how are they going to be happy with anything? So that's what I've got to say about that. China says they broke as hell, trying to convince you have less than them. Yeah, that's it. A lot of times, I mean, I met so many narcissists where they were always trying to impress me, and I was so much more ahead than they were. I was in a position of life they couldn't even dream of. And yet they were trying to big themselves up to me. They were bragging to me as though they were so much greater than me, when actually no. They just felt so insecure that they had to put me down. And they became very competitive. It's all from their own insecurities, their own lack of self-worth. Marajik Vandermeer says, I am heavily used. High amounts of money, validation, houses, cars. Very sorry to hear that. It's sad we give these things to someone who can't even feel it. They can't even appreciate it. They can't even be grateful. And you just imagine if you gave that to perhaps another empath. If you gave just a fraction of what you gave to the narcissist to an empath, they would be over the moon with that. They really would. But narcissists, no matter what you do for them, it's never going to be enough. Because they have a void that can never be filled. They're never going to be happy. But that should provide you with some comfort, knowing that they will never be happy. No matter what they got from you, no matter what they used you for, they're not going to be happy with that. And they're not going to be happy with anything else they get from anyone. So China says, one thought he was going to pimp me. Yeah, that's what a lot of them think. They're like these, they think they're like these pimps, these mafia bosses. They're just a bunch of wannabes. They're wannabe criminal masterminds. They're not supporting this cause now for sexual abuse. You see down below beneath this video. We already did the cause for Gaza, managed to raise over $1,000, and I'm Very proud of that. Thank you all for supporting that cause. And now, hopefully by the end of the year, let's try and raise $1,000 for victims of sexual abuse, especially children. So let's work together to raise funds for this charity so that they can help to protect our children, and not just children, but anyone who may be a victim of sexual abuse, and also to prevent it from happening in the future. Gina Reed says they will use their own children as well. You know, that's one of the worst things for me. Is how these narcissists, as you mentioned, they can use their own child. I just can't imagine doing that. Like, my belief is that the child should never have to sacrifice themselves for their parent. If anything, it should be the parent who is sacrificing themselves for their child. That's how it should be, because we should want our future generations to be better, not the previous generations holding them back. So I just find that sickening. When these narcissists, as you mentioned, they use their own children, especially if it's financially. You should be making sure that your child has their emotional needs met, their financial needs, they've got everything they need. Even if you have to sacrifice part of your own life for them, then that's just what has to be done. I mean, children are everything. Children are the future. And that's why it just shocks me. It's one thing that even to this day I find difficult to accept. How narcissists are using their own children. That just disgusts me. And if you don't know, I do actually have I have a 4-year-old daughter of my own, and I've been away from her for quite some time. But I am looking forward to reuniting with my daughter again very soon. The George says they basically ruin themselves. Yes, I have seen several psychologists mention. There's Richard Grannon, I believe Dr. Brahmani said as well, and also, I can't remember the name, but there's an Irish psychologist who is also on YouTube, and they've all said that narcissism is self-destructive. Through being narcissistic, they are actually destroying themselves. And because they have such low awareness, they can't even see it. So yeah, they do ruin themselves. Christopher Cox says, all the ones I know lose everybody, lose health, and some start to get enemies that want to hurt them. They do, they lose anyone good, anyone real, and all they're left with is just a bunch of enablers and blind monkeys, people who enable their own self-destructive behavior, people who are just as fake as them. But then good people, empaths like ourselves, they lose us. People who would have moved mountains for them, people who maybe did already move mountains for them. We did everything we could. We sacrificed ourselves. And For what? It amounted to nothing. Because they didn't deserve us. And we deserve so much better than that. Miss Carter Love says, they're just so evil and dead inside. There we go. I mean, they don't feel anything. You just got to look at it like this. They didn't feel anything for you when you were hurting, when you needed them, when you needed someone to be there for you, when you needed someone to care. Did they feel anything for you? Were they there for you? No. So if they can't feel that, how are they going to feel happy without you? Of course they're not. If they couldn't feel anything for you, then they're just not going to feel anything. They don't feel anything. They're lifeless zombies. All they feel is anger. And that's why they couldn't be there for you, because of their arrogance and entitlement. They're very ungrateful, so they're always angry and very resentful. And that goes with them wherever they go. They can't be happy with anything. They can't feel anything other than anger. Eddie Wen says they compete in a delusional matrix. That's right. I mean, it's all fake. This entire world is all fake. And I used to be one of them. Not a narcissist, but I used to be one of those people competing in that delusional matrix. And although most of them, they will never admit it, I can say that it was a miserable, empty experience. I mean, they're seeking validation from people who don't really care, people who just want something from them, people who want to use them, people who just see what they got, see what they're achieving, and it just makes them hate them even more. So it doesn't really get them anywhere. Irani says the child becomes the parent, unfortunately. These narcissists have no limits. Yes, you will start to see that. I mean, if you're from a narcissistic family, you were likely the parent for your own parents, and possibly for your siblings as well. And if you're co-parenting with a narcissist, you will start to see that it's like the child seems to take on the role of the parent for the narcissistic parent. So suddenly they're like their therapist, and they are having to attend to them emotionally, listen to all of their problems, things that a child should never be doing with their parents. That's emotional incest. The parent should be there for the child. As parents, we are meant to regulate our children. We are meant to be there for them emotionally. They're not meant to see us when we're upset, when we're hurt. I mean, maybe sometimes, once in a while, because we don't want our children to live a fake life and to see us as though we're not even human. So sometimes, maybe yes, if we're having a bad day, they can see us maybe a little bit angry, a little bit upset. That's okay. But it shouldn't be fussing and fighting every day. That's highly traumatizing for a child. They shouldn't be seeing that at all. We need to be more brave, more courageous. or not us rather, I mean the narcissists, they need to be more aware of how they're affecting their child, especially emotionally. But I know what that's like, to be an emotional punching bag for a narcissistic parent. It can cause many of us to become codependents, people pleasers, to where we think that we are responsible for another person's emotions and that we have to regulate them. But that is not our job. People must regulate themselves. We can guide them, we can try to soothe them, but it's not our responsibility. Miss Catherine Love says they actually enjoy when you're hurting. It's crazy how they do, yes. Because their brains, something happened when they were children and now their brains are not wired correctly. So it feeds into a different neural pathway, which is incorrect. It's faulty. So many of them are sadistic, they're malignant, they find pleasure in people's pain. And you may be a codependent, a people pleaser, you may be fawning for the narcissist, trying to make them happy, and they won't even let you have that. They won't let you feel like you've made them happy, like you've done a good job. Because it's like they understand your trauma, they understand how your brain works, and that you just want to be there for them, you want to make them happy, just like you were placed in that role as a child to make your parents happy, and they won't even give you that. It's very cruel, very sadistic, but this is what they're like. Norman Dutch says what's crazy is that 10% of a population has some form of personality disorder or psychopathy. I've actually seen that it's far more than that. Dr. Brahmani has stated in her videos that 1 in 6 people are narcissists. I think that's about 17.5% narcissists. And I've seen another statistic that says 10% of the population are psychopaths. Maybe around 1 in 20 CEOs are psychopaths as well. And of course, that's not including other cluster B disorders, borderline sociopathy, histrionic, bipolar, and then there's cluster A's, cluster C's, I think there's cluster D's as well. And then there's just people with narcissistic traits, there's toxic people. So this is everywhere. Narcissism is everywhere. I've seen a statistic that states that 96% of families in the world are dysfunctional. But it seems like a lot of people want to play it down and act like it's not as bad as it is, because otherwise, where do we start? It's much easier when you just reduce it down and you just say it's just a small percentage of the population, not the majority. Because otherwise, what do we do when it's like, actually, it is the majority of the population who are like this? What is the answer for that? But from my research, from my studies and the facts and the statistics that I've seen, we are talking about the majority of the population. And I don't mean that the majority of the population has full-blown narcissistic personality disorder. Of course not. But I have seen a statistic from a behavioral analyst who is quite famous on YouTube. And he specializes in psychopaths. He has said that 10% of the population are psychopaths. And that doesn't include sociopaths, psychopaths, narcissists rather, histrionics, and really it is the majority of the population these days who are narcissistic. I mean, this is how you go on YouTube and these videos on narcissists have billions of views. There's only 8 billion people in the world because this is everywhere. And not only that, but if these people who are watching these videos, if they had any support, if they had someone to listen to them, someone who actually cared, then why would they be watching these videos? We watch these videos because we don't have any support off the internet. There's no one there who will listen to us, who will validate our experience, who will understand. Because the reality is, another statistic I've seen is that 1 to 2% of the world's population are empaths. It's really that rare. And that's how I'm so proud of this community that we have built together. Because I know many of you are empaths. And we've managed to create this community where we can all interact together. But otherwise, we would not be able to do that. So, it's definitely a very valuable achievement to have this here. But that's just I mean, I'm sure many people don't want to accept it, but that is the truth. 1 to 2% of the world's population are empaths. 96% of families in the world are dysfunctional. This is everywhere. I mean, so many people in this world, they have fake family members who aren't really there for them, don't really support them. And friends, where it's like, maybe you just do things together, drink or go to clubs, but they're not really your friends. They're not really there for you. They don't really listen to you. They don't really care about you. And this is why the 2 most common illnesses in the world are mental illnesses, anxiety and depression. Because everyone feels isolated, everyone feels alone. And that's what we need to focus on. We need to accept that. Because with that acceptance of reality, of the truth, only then can we make positive changes. Only then can we have real connection. The sad truth is that it's gotten to a point where most people in this world, they're more comfortable and quite satisfied with just having fake relationships, just having an account on social media where they got all of these followers and they just get lots of attention validation online, attention whoring, and not actually having any real connection. It seems most people these days, they're quite comfortable with that. The George says, I think narcissists are sociopaths. The way it works is that all sociopaths and psychopaths are narcissists, but not all narcissists are sociopaths or psychopaths. Sociopaths and psychopaths, that is actually, it's a separate disorder. It's antisocial personality disorder, which is different to narcissistic personality disorder, but they do share many of the same traits. It's just that it's higher on the spectrum. Sociopaths and psychopaths, they do tend to be con artists, and they are primarily concerned with money and power. The George said, in bigger cities, there's more narcissists, as Dr. Romney said, yes. In the thumbnail of one of her videos, it said 1 in 6 people are narcissists. And if you listen to the video, she actually says she believes that there's even more in cities. So maybe 1 in 5, maybe 1 in 4. This is everywhere these days. And it should really make you think when the narcissist in your life is blaming you, and they've started a smear campaign against you, and they've gathered all of their flying monkeys. The odds are that many of those flying monkeys are actually narcissists themselves. And it's just being reversed on you as the victim. This is what they do. They annihilate all of the good people, all of the empaths. They will pick on you for just one little thing, while knowing deep down they're far worse than you. And maybe this is why now, these days, empaths are so rare. Just 1 to 2% of the world's population, while 10% are psychopaths. That's 5 or 10 times more. I'm going to get back to work now on my next video, which I will be uploading in the next week. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe and click on notifications so that you will be notified when I go live again in the future. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I read your comments every day. I appreciate all donations, no matter how small. You can donate to my PayPal. My PayPal is paypal.me/Narc Survivor. And if you'd like to book a one-on-one coaching session with me, just head to my website. It is narcsurvivor.co.uk. Also, check out my Instagram. I'm posting new reels every day from my trip last year to Malaysia. Lots of new content on there every day. Follow me. It is Narc Survivor YouTube on Instagram. Thank you all for joining me on another Narc Survivor live video. I appreciate you all. And as always, I look forward to speaking with you in another live video very soon.